Welcome. This is part 3 in the series Energy Data Big Decisions. So as a quick refresher, in part 1, Saul Griffith of other labs spoke with us about his work primarily on the supply side. In part 2, Phil Faree spoke about the comprehensive reviews he did of the energy savings potential of demand-side technologies while he was at McKinsey and also the National Renewable Energy Lab. So both used data to guide their decisions, their selection of what they and others should work on, and they used data to evaluate and improve the technologies that they were working on. Okay, so today we're going to explore the role of data in the energy space, but we'll focus a bit more on the software side of things. So a lot of what we'll cover falls into the bucket of the clean web, or the use of information technology to drive improvements in sustainability. Our format today is a bit unusual. We'll start with the energy seminar panel, followed by an energy data jam to conceive of clean web ideas. So I'll introduce all of us first, and then we'll all give short talks. We'll have a panel where we'll answer questions, and then the data jam will take place outside starting around 5:30. So our first speaker will be Adam Rein of Mission Point Capital. He'll share a VC's perspective of the clean web space and its opportunities. Adam's also worked as a strategy consultant for Bain. He co-founded Alteris Energies, a startup launched out of MIT to develop the world's first commercial high-altitude wind turbine. He's also director of Greentown Labs, an early-stage incubator of clean tech startups. Our second speaker will be Ian Kalin, and he'll talk about the initiatives by the government and other entities to make data publicly available. Ian served as a counterterrorism officer and a nuclear engineer in the US Navy, and was managing director for the market intelligence company Power Advocate, providing insights for over $35 billion of construction projects. He was also the first Presidential Innovation Fellow and is currently the Director of Open Data for Socrata. And third, I'll share how our ARPA-E-funded initiative has used data in conjunction with behavioral techniques in an attempt to bring about energy savings. My background's in cognitive neuroscience, and I've done postdocs in neuroeconomics and behavioral epidemiology. I'm currently a research associate at Precourt Energy Efficiency Center and director of the ARPA-E project that I'll tell you more about later. After the seminar, you're welcome to join our data jam at 5:30, like I mentioned. We'll have that in the foyer just outside the auditorium. Data jam, or at least our data jam, will be a brainstorming session to conceive of energy application and algorithm ideas. You don't need any programming experience to attend. We'll have pizza for dinner and a range of experts from many great orgs joining to help you develop the apps. So welcome to the Energy Seminar and Data Jam, and we'll start with Adam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I know energy and data isn't always the most exciting topic, but I can see a lot of passionate faces in the room. So we're all really excited to talk to you about it. As Carrie said, I come out of the energy startup background, working with companies in the wind sector and the building energy efficiency sector. About a year ago, I joined a team called Mission Point Capital in Connecticut, which invests in clean energy startups. And I opened up their office in San Francisco. So if anyone here is up in San Francisco and wants to chat about energy and data or new innovations, please come by and see me. As you can see, our team set about with a mission to invest in the low carbon economy and companies that were leading that transition. So this involved big solar energy companies, smart grid companies, wind energy companies, energy efficiency, carbon markets, and even a major recycling company. So in the energy world, these are pretty typical companies, ones that deal with big engines, big pieces of equipment, and large infrastructure budgets. So maybe I'd ask something like Upwind Solutions was one of our companies that actually is a leader in energy and data in the wind sector. So maybe I'd propose a question. With a giant 300-foot tall wind turbine, what is the data part of a company like that, or that kind of energy innovation?
Wind forecasting.
Yeah, so wind forecasting. That's a critical area to help wind farms operate better, is to be able to predict what the wind load is coming so they can either feather the turbines or change their operation to operate more efficiently. Is there another area that's important with data and wind turbines anyone can think of?
Energy storage.
Energy storage, that's more of a grid problem, not necessarily at the farm level, but a real critical data problem. What Upwind did is launch a product to help they operate and maintain wind farms, is to better predict when wind turbines would fail. So predictive maintenance is probably the #1 use of data at a wind farm. And we supported a company that was trying to innovate in this area. Trillian is a leading smart meter and smart grid company. I think it's obvious why on the grid data is important. But one example is one of their customers in Maine got hit by a big nor'easter storm. And they had a record-setting time about getting the grid back up after the storm by better being able to predict where trees were hitting and knocking down power lines. Something that's very hard to do if you don't have data analytics behind it. So I'm not really a PowerPoint slide guy, coming out of a consulting background. But energy and data is very hard to talk about unless you have something visual to put it to. So I tried to put on one page, one quick shout out before I jump into the next page is a friend of mine who leads data science at EcoFactor, who should be here for the Data Jam. He and I organize a meetup group called Data Science for Sustainability once a month. And anyone who's really passionate about the topic, especially from the technical side, we invite you to come out. Our next session will be focused on agriculture in December. And you can Google it or come up to me afterwards. So this was my attempt to kind of frame how our company looks at data and energy on one page. It's a complicated chart, so you don't have to read it all. But what it came from is when most people who I talk to about energy and data, they think really about their utility bill. You know, a lot of us who consume energy are very focused on our own lives, which is our own relationship with PG&E, or how do we better use less energy in our homes. And in fact, this is a really important part of innovation. There's lots of startups and research that's helping us use less energy, and Carrie's going to tell us more about that. But my message today is there's a lot more exciting things in the world of energy and data than just your utility bill. So we really look at 4 different areas of energy and data. Probably the biggest one where there's innovation is in the building sector. So this could be homes or offices or data centers. And this is a nice sector because there's some real obvious places where you can get good pieces of data from. This would be from a thermostat. This would be from a smart meter, of which millions are now rolled out across the country. This would be from voltage clamps, which companies are trying to do, especially in commercial buildings. Or especially in some of the newer innovations, trying to get data directly from the user about their own feelings about their energy or their own usage. And here's just a sampling of some of the startups, especially some of the lesser known ones that are out there. And the real important thing, I think, with anyone who wants to innovate in the energy and data sector, thinking from a startup or commercial perspective, is focused on the customer, which would be the giant bucket at the bottom who might pay you one day. And our big problem we see is a lot of folks are launching a startup where they may be wanting to help convince people to use their lights more efficiently in their building. And there's some great academic research, some here at Stanford, which shows that you can save up to 15% of your energy bill, surely by showing people their energy or educating them. But it's hard to start a company out of that because a lot of times there's not a lot of people to pay for it. So going down to whether it's your utility who's going to pay for this, a building owner, or even a homeowner is a critical factor. I think a second world that many of us who've used Uber or Lyft are familiar with is the world of energy and data. That's kind of a second order factor of efficient use of vehicles. And although I think a lot of us look at shared vehicles, the even more exciting areas of innovation come from the new wave of electric vehicles being tied to the grid, from a new wave of in-car data that's coming off of the data port in your car or from your smartphone, or for better optimized route planning for fleet operators or truckers. And again, another handful of startups you can look at in your own time. Dash is a particularly interesting one, trying to get more data directly out of cars on their performance. But again, here you have to think, are you selling your innovation to Tesla or Ford, or is it directly to the driver of the car? And it's anyone who comes in, that's the first question we want to know. I'll jump to the fourth box, which is transmission. This may be the least sexy area of energy and data. And it could be involved in the electric grid and how we transmit our electrons. It could be our pipelines that transmit our liquid fuels and gas fuels. It could be energy storage, which is our nice buffer system to help us stabilize our transmission grids. Or demand response, the ability, a really very valuable way to reduce load at peak times to save a lot of money for utilities that always have to keep the lights on. This is one where Ian and I were talking earlier. There's a huge need, and what's nice about this area is there's a lot of data out there because, especially either in pipelines or the electric grid, the owners of that infrastructure are already collecting lots of data on the operations. So if you want, although it's hard to get, if you want to, say, solve the problem of reducing congestion in the electric grid, a really important problem, there's data out there, and if you talk to Ian afterwards, he can point you how to get it. It's just not easy to find. The final area, which was kind of an all-purpose bucket I called industry, is probably where I spend most of my time now. In many ways, you can think of this as using data to get at energy from a roundabout way. Our company has shifted from trying to use less energy or make energy less carbon intensive to kind of a broader investment thesis around how do we make whole communities and countries resilient to the shocks that come from climate change or everyday living in order to be more resilient in the face of crises that we face. And what you realize when you start looking at it is that energy is embedded in everything. You need to use energy to pump water for agriculture. You need to use energy in industrial processes to create almost all the materials we use. So if you recycle more and you have data on how to improve recycling, it's a way to reduce energy. In addition, if you can more efficiently optimize how the cost of capital for financing energy projects, that's even a way of using data to make it cheaper to produce renewable energy. And some of the data in this sector is exciting because it's not directly tied to electrons. So there's a great innovator right here at Stanford that's trying to use aerial images off of crop dusters or drones in order to have better information in farms about where they're wasting water or using too much fertilizer. And although that's really a farming problem, I like to think about it as an energy problem and an environmental problem at the same time. And so there's not only great startups, but you're also tapping into a whole new set of customers as well. This is an example at our meetup we showed that probably got the most interest, which is cows may be the place you would think there's least data in this world. But in fact, here's 5 different startups or nonprofits we found that are trying to outfit new low-cost sensor technology onto cows. And we said, why are there so many people that want to put sensors on the cows? And the theory that everything's interlinked, cows emit methane, one of the major cause of greenhouse gas emissions. Depending on what you feed a cow, you can monitor their diet in order to have them reduce less methane. Cow health is a major issue. It's very hard for a farmer to know which cows are sick. And if you have cows that are dying unnecessarily, you have to provide all the energy and food and resources that's not even going into food. So we tie energy and data back to the whole world of resource efficiency. And although our company hasn't yet invested in cows, if there is a budding cow entrepreneur out here, we'd love to meet you. Because this is really, if you think of livestock, cattle, and data, if someone could really solve the problem of better data on livestock, you'd be solving a huge economic problem and environmental problem. Another different view we always take is trying to understand the difference between sustainability and resilience. Now, these are two buzzwords that I'm guessing you've heard your professors or your friends say many times, and you tend to tune them out because they're just kind of environmental words. But I think understanding the root of them is really important to say, what value are we creating? Sustainability has to do with system efficiency. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is create a system that can be at equilibrium, where it has all the inputs it needs over time to continue a cycle of producing its outputs. And so a lot of processes that focus on the efficient use of energy, energy efficiency, or in the case of irrigation, something like agriculture, drip irrigation, is tied to more efficient use of our resources, leading to a more sustainable ecosystem. I'd say we more and more look at resilience as actually what people are willing to pay for and what's really driving key crises and concerns in our country now. Whether it's getting hit by a storm, a hurricane, whether it's getting hit by a drought if you're a farmer, whether it's a traffic jam if you're a taxi driver or driver. It's the shocks to the system that throw our economy and our ecosystems into crisis. And a lot of the, if you think about it, the people who are responsible for keeping our grid up every day, as opposed to reducing our 6% losses in our transmission grid, their bosses care way less about that than they do about preventing the next blackout. So if you can solve the blackout problem, your data in the energy world is going to be much more valuable than eking out efficiency gains. Although they're both important and they're both needed and we care about them both. But it's something to just encourage people to, I think efficiency is the word we hear all the time in the energy world. But I think thinking of resilience is really important when you're trying to think about where value is created. I just want to put a couple pieces of advice out for people who are thinking about innovations or startups in the energy sector. A lot of people who want to do an innovation say, what are my skills right now and what's the first problem in front of me? And that leads to a lot of people making apps that can show a homeowner more data about their energy bill. This is actually really needed. It's an important problem, but I think we have way more innovators focusing on this problem than there is value in the innovation. So from an investor standpoint, what we really look for is someone who has a novel technical solution or a novel business model to solve the harder problem like grid congestion, where you have less people that are even aware of it and focused on it. As I mentioned earlier, finding a consumer who's willing to pay. So a lot of people say, what do? I do data visualization. That's my gift to the world. I'm going to take data that used to be hidden. I'm going to show it to you and make it really beautiful. This can be good, but much more valuable is actually providing a service to someone which takes that data, does the analytics on it, and helps solve a problem for someone. A second advice is a lot of people come to us. We met a company that said they're the O-Power for water. O-Power is a really successful, popular company in the energy world that's been able to sell to big utilities a data solution to providing better bills to all their customers. We tend to find on a personal note with our firm that selling through kind of larger bureaucratic utilities is a tougher thing, although Ian's going to tell you why he's been able to crack that code. But being able to actually find customers who are easier to sell to is an easier path to go as an entrepreneur. A formula that we've seen work a couple times, these are Climate Corp and Waze, are two companies that were both bought for around $1 billion this year. And they both actually had a similar formula where they took a lot of data that's already publicly available. So in Climate Corp's case, it's weather data, and in Waze, it's GIS mapping data. And then they involved this special sauce, which was data that only they could collect, or they could bring, or that they were adding to that. And then they were using that, adding on a very intensive layer of analytics and involving a solution. In this case, Climate Corpse was a crop insurance, a weather insurance solution, and Waze was a real-time mapping solution. So if you want to think of kind of an easy formula that's worked in this sector, that's one of them. And this is a tricky one for me because I used to work with a wind turbine company. I helped start an incubator for hardware startups out in Boston. But it's a tough time in the hardware world. And we see a lot of folks who have a new piece of hardware that can collect data, a new low-cost sensor, for example, that can collect data. And so my heart is very much into trying to support a new wave of hardware startups because it's very well needed. But it's been very hard for folks to make a really profitable return on hardware startups. So over time, hardware tends to get commoditized. And secondly, the successful folks find a way of deploying their hardware en masse without having to sell them one by one. So beware of hardware. It's really hard, but it's really well needed as well. And that's it. So I'll be here at the Data Jam afterwards. And thanks for your time.
It's eluding us. Thank you. Hi there. My name's Ian Kalin. I am the Director of Open Data for Socrata, an open government company. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame the concept of energy data in a slightly different perspective, specifically concentrating on what governments are doing and should be doing to help you all become not just wildly successful, but also solving so many of the energy challenges that are in front of us today. First, I want to frame what I consider to be a delivery crisis in terms of government services and government data. From our personal perspective, we see an increasing accessibility of basic online services. From the Amazon.com to Instacart, Walmart, Target, we have, as in our own personal lives, an increased accessibility to basic services and products. And of course, from the government perspective, this is the government view, that should be a warning call for them and a business opportunity for many of you entrepreneurs in the room. There was an expectation that they could deliver on those expectations over time. But because of either the federal government shutting down, which no one expected, or even at the local level, good old-fashioned city hall budgets being cut, the actual ability to deliver on those expectations is at best holding static, providing this margin, this gap of expectation and reliability in terms of the citizen experience versus the customer experience. And so on the specific side of what it means for energy data and energy services, governments are trying to solve this problem in many ways. One of the ways in which they are doing that is by opening themselves up, open government. Public accessibility to government resources is something I'll call open data, although some would say that this concept is not exactly new, and it's the same thing that business intelligence and other analytics firms and other sectors have seen for such time. But I'll say that there's something kind of new happening now. From the federal government in the United States all across the world, even at the city level, more and more cities, governments, counties are trying to open up their treasure troves of digital data. And again, this collection of information is not new, but the change in scale has become a change in kind. It's easier to store over the past 5 or 10 years. And from my humble perspective, working as an entrepreneur in the energy space, I've worked for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and I've supported a number of aspiring innovators. The data that's out there right now is barely being used. And a lot of it, by the way, is very hard to even access in the first place. But governments are trying. I'm here to say that I have New York and South Bend, Indiana, a big city and a small city, but even at the federal government level, recently President Obama issued an executive order mandating that open is the new default. Department of Energy, EPA, Department of Interior, FERC, that's all relevant. These federal agencies are required now, within the next 2 months, specifically December 1st, to release treasure troves of data that was previously unaccessed, previously unavailable. And it's not because they were trying to keep it from you. Like many other governments, they were trying to do their best job of publishing information. And there's some very specific agencies whose core mission was to publish from their inception, Energy Intelligence Administration. They're great at it. But the machine readability of that data, a direct download, a full download, for those of you that are familiar with application programming interfaces for the coders in the room, the ability to get that data at scale is relatively new and is going to change in the next few weeks. So not only from a broader perspective is energy data relatively hard to find, in this open data world of governments trying to publish their content to actually help communities solve their government challenges. Look at cities like Boston, and San Francisco that are publishing the energy consumption of commercial buildings over 30,000 square feet or other policy innovations like that. This data is trying to get out. Governments are trying to share this stuff so that more folks like, communities and innovators like folks here in the room can do more things with that data and help these cities and governments solve their energy and climate challenges. So open data, again, is not new. I'll give an example of one of my favorite examples of open data. That's GPS, the Global Positioning System. All very familiar with this concept, I'm sure, especially on this campus. But I'd like to frame this story in the context not of a technological innovation from the Department of Defense, but rather an open data innovation to create jobs with little effort from the government. GPS data, when it was first released, was not done through an act of Congress. It was not some massive regulation. It was just opened. Now, granted, there was a little bit of an internal error set in the beginning, but the hardware and data from the GPS system is now widely available, and we all know, we see it in our own lives. Everyone here probably has a smartphone. We're benefiting on some level from the derivations, the business value of GPS data. And a recent study that just came out, led some folks at McKinsey, also some folks from the White House, measured the economic value of GPS data as being $100 billion in the US alone just last year. That's from one data, we'll call it data system. So what is the energy version of GPS? What's the next GPS? I will offer one humble example, one perspective, and I actually think it's kind of funny that Adam and I have something in common. We've, I guess, both given money to Dash. So Dash is a company that won the Department of Energy's Apps for Vehicles Challenge. I know another app may not be as exciting from a venture capital perspective, but I liked it because it showed, in my mind, an example of what could be the next GPS. Every car and truck in America has something called an onboard diagnostics port, OBD. OBD2 is the standard. For those of you, how many, I don't know, I shouldn't ask you, how many, for the gearheads in the room, you may recognize that the old ways of getting the emissions tested on your car so you can drive it was you took it to a mechanic shop and they would basically measure the emissions out of the tailpipe. That emissions standard from the EPA, with an industry standard led by the EPA, has a lot of other data in it. The CAN bus, Controller Area Network bus, on board all cars and trucks have a tremendous amount of data, and here's the fun part, it's already standard. You don't need big data analytics to be able to compare one truck to another coupe. So that standard lowers the barrier to entry and is, in my humble opinion, a data set that everyone has in their own lives that is barely being touched. Now, the example given before for some of these businesses that are starting to leverage that, I think it's just starting to crack some pieces into that glacier, so to speak. But imagine what can happen if the following products were available in the near future. Imagine you're a parent, for those of you in the room that are parents, you get a text message every time your teenager drives over the speed limit. Think about the data side of that. It's one thing to get the speed limit at the speed of the car, but you have to mash that up against highways and streets, which, by the way, managed by cities, counties, states, or federal, different highway jurisdictions, different data sets. Imagine if you're able to see when an entire fleet turned on their windshield wipers, or when headlights came on, or whether or not the acceleration of a certain driver is leading to the inefficient use of that truck. That's a massive amount of economic value, all from one port that's available right now. For roughly $20 for the simplest version, you get access to that onboard diagnostic port data. And at scale, now you may have there's a hardware question about how you get that data off that car and truck. But I believe, in terms of the amount of time that the average American, a really person in the middle class economy, spends in their car, I personally believe that that's the next GPS of data. You crack the code on how to actually leverage that information, get it off cars and trucks, you're going to see a GPS level economic impact. So from a government accountability perspective, are you getting the data you need that you know probably a lot of these government organizations have? Are you getting the data you need to actually deliver on some of these products and services? Well, a lot of the governments are trying to actually solve the same things that we are, fighting climate change, reducing congestion, living more sustainable and resilient lives in more resilient cities. Well, some city governments in here, oh, it's actually kind of small. The city of Edmonton has posted their green metrics, their performance metrics, being transparent. We're trying to fight climate change. We can't do it by ourselves, but they're going a step further. They're also, here's an easier example to see it. There's transit metrics, how we live, do we live green, how resilient we are from an economic perspective. But they don't just say, yes, we care about climate change, which is very important for a government executive. They go to the next level of depth and say, okay, we're 81.7% on our goal of fighting climate change measured by these standards, and they have it broken down into different categories of government responsibility and performance. But that's not, wait, there's more. They go to the next level of detail and provide the raw data of where it's measured from and how. And they also provide, again, for the technologists in the room, an API accessibility. You can get that information on a real-time basis as it's updated by the generator. I would consider this an example of a best practice. This is a leading example of how a city government in this context is trying to say we can't do this by ourselves. We cannot fight climate change as a government, even though you've elected me or you've appointed me, or in some way this government service is trying to actually provide this service for its citizens. They're recognizing to get the information out, what data is available? There's a lot of energy data that's trying to get out. But this is raw, this is wholesale, this is raw information. It cannot actually fight climate change. But in the hands of a lot of the businesses that Adam described, I personally believe, and I'm one of those folks who built a business that had wholesale data built on some private data. I will humbly purport, and maybe we'll have a chance to get into this in the Q&A, the tremendous economic potential to help governments achieve these goals. So I'll sum up here. We're running a little bit over, actually, so I'll cut myself short, hopefully provide a chance for the last presentation and then some questions at the end. But I'll summarize in saying that this movement of open data, again, this is not a new concept, but there's new levels of accessibility. There's new data coming out every single day. From a federal perspective, there's a massive amount of information that's going to be available in the next month. And that's just the starting point. It's going to go up from there. Cities and counties across America, and really cities all across, countries all across the world, are taking advantage of this opportunity to publish their content and help businesses grow, help transform this wholesale data into retail products and services, whether you're providing a visualization, whether you're doing the mashup, whether you're solving the problem of getting this unusually standard and really easy to read data off of cars and trucks, and then turning it into something that can be not just the business that hopefully makes all of you wildly successful, helps us accomplish our common goals of living a cleaner, more responsible, energy efficient, self-sustaining, and resilient country and lives. So I'll cut myself off there. This is just a list of some of the other opportunities that we're seeing in open data. I look forward to connecting with you afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. So about 3 years ago, we got an award from the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy and the California Energy Commission. And the award's being extended for another 2 years. I'm going to talk a little bit about this initiative today and illustrate how we've used data in different ways through it. So the initiative spans about 10 departments ranging from computer science, electrical engineering, civil and environmental engineering, management sciences and engineering on the one hand, and psych, communications, education, and behavioral epidemiology on the other. The goal of the initiative is to use smart meter and other sensor data in conjunction with behavioral approaches to achieve large-scale energy savings. So we're at a unique point in history where wireless sensors are becoming pervasive on the one hand. So, for example, the vast majority of buildings in California and Texas now have smart meters, and the same is true for other states and countries. The sensors are also used by car insurance companies, as was mentioned earlier, and fitness products, et cetera. So these provide a lot of new data. On the other hand, web-enabled devices are pervasive so that computers and phones can deliver programs at scale to help individuals reduce energy use. So in the middle, we have our Stanford engine, which links the two. The engine includes 3 buckets: technology, behavioral programs, and evaluation. So within these 3 buckets are contained 19 projects, with many of them pictured here. And like I said, I'm going to go through some of them now to illustrate how we've used data in them. And in about a month or 2, we should have our website up and running that will have publications associated with many of these projects, as well as many of the deliverables, et cetera. Okay, so these figures depict some results from our 3 algorithm projects. At the top, Ram Rajagopal and Martin Fisher have used large residential and commercial smart meter data sets from PG&E to determine energy use profiles in order to help guide more strategic energy efficiency and demand response program targeting. So as a simplified example to illustrate, some schools may be using more energy than others, and they could tell whether that's due to energy not being reduced in the evenings or weekends and suggest programs to them based on that information. On the left, Zico Colter and Andrew Ng advanced disaggregation algorithms. So these algorithms take the whole home energy signal and separate it into appliance-specific data so that people would know where their energy is being used. So for example, in the dryer, refrigerator, etc. Knowing the energy use on specific appliances can also allow us to detect when something isn't working or it's using more energy than it should. And then on the right, Hamid Agajan used low-resolution camera sensor data to track human activity patterns and then developed learning algorithms that helped improve lighting automation to match user preferences while at the same time reducing energy use. Okay, so moving on to our behavioral projects. Several of the projects used smart meter data to provide feedback to people on how much energy they consumed over time, and also provided recommendations on what they could do to reduce their energy, et cetera. So this is the type of thing that Adam referred to as being highly overdone, which I completely agree with. And anyhow, more on that later at the Data Jam. Greg Walton, though, did embed some experiments into the interfaces. He's tested thousands of people, and I don't know if Steve Schmidt's in the room, but one of them was through a collaboration with him. At testing things like the role that community plays in motivating people to make energy savings or how to best organize recommendations, et cetera. So most of these projects, in some of the cases, I may not explain what behavioral experiments were done, given we're talking about data here today, but there are embedded behavioral experiments in all of them as well. Okay, so professors Byron Reeves and Bani Banerjee translated energy consumption data from sensors into gameplay in 2 different projects. They incorporated competition and collaboration. The Powerhouse Game on the left and in the background allows one to challenge their friends to Friday night lights out challenges, etc., and then see who won based on the data. It also has an embedded interactive game with characters running around a house that retrains habits through reinforcement. Power Tower on the right is a Facebook game where multiple players get shapes based on their energy reductions in order to play a Tetris-like game against other teams. These projects use sensor data in incentive programs. So Bani Banerjee had a second project, and that's in the upper right, Kidogo. And that allows one to compute their real-world energy savings and then microfinance individuals in developing countries based on those savings. This stretches the perceived value of the energy savings, as energy is fairly inexpensive in the US. On the bottom left, Balaji Prabhakar created a lottery-like program where points in the lottery were derived from transit sensor data, from which they derived the time of day and the type of transit used. Individuals are poor at assessing probability and are very engaged in trying to win these larger sums of money. This project is being piloted in Singapore and has an enrollment of about 15,000 participants has significantly shifted folks from off-peak to off-peak travel or public transit. And he's had a couple of other programs in other places as well, India, et cetera, that have scaled out to cities, et cetera. Okay, Sam McClure's Appliance Calculator application in collaboration with Sebastian Hood has been used by about 60,000 people through Google AdWords. We've used a variety of data types in this. So data about current appliances on the market through an API, electricity cost data by geographic region, EPA data on energy consumption of older appliances by model. And we may also pull disaggregated appliance data from an individual user so they can see how their energy consumption compares to other models. On the psych side, by testing changes in the interface, we've found, contrary to expectations, that projecting out cost savings over time does not appear to prompt people to browse more energy efficient refrigerators, whereas simply changing the sort order to put the most efficient appliances on top does, which has interesting sort of meta implications for strategies used in changing energy efficient behaviors that I'm happy to talk more about later. In addition to using sensor data in a user-facing way, all of our behavioral interventions also used sensor data to evaluate the effectiveness of programs in reducing energy use. So this was also true of the Girl Scout program. where we analyzed changes in energy use from smart meter data over the course of the program. That program was developed in part to channel folks to some of our online programs, as community-based programs can be highly effective, and the Girl Scouts has massive penetration. In addition, we had a couple of projects that focused more squarely on developing evaluation methods. So one was a study evaluating Google Power Meter using 10-minute energy data. A second one, depicted on the right, didn't use sensor data, but instead recorded tweets to study how the conversation about energy and climate change changed over time. So this group of investigators records every tweet that contains any of 120 energy-related words, and it's created a searchable Twitter Explorer to analyze the data. Okay, so in summary, energy data allows for quantification, and quantification enables a variety of functions. So for one, it enables analytics, such as segmentation, so we can better target programs, or provide diagnostics or personalized recommendations so that people aren't left guessing what they should do. Second, quantification enables a variety of behavioral techniques that were more difficult to effectively implement before. So for example, feedback, incentives, markets, competitions, data visualization. Third, quantification allows us to create better programs with improved speed, ease, cost, and scale through objective evaluation of how they're performing. Fourth, it offers us the opportunity to transform evaluation. So currently, utilities are somewhat constrained in the types of programs that they can receive Public Utility Commission compensation for. Being able to quantify energy savings of a broader range of marketing and media and other types of programs would incentivize utilities and diversify their programs. And fifth, quantification allows us to improve engineering and economic models to inform policy. And I didn't talk about examples of that here. So let's open it up for questions. So why don't we come up here and... All right, so we'll start with students first and then open it up to everyone. Who's a question?
Or there's no students?
There's lots of students here. Okay, people other than students. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a question for Ian, the government person.
Sure.
So in terms of releasing all that data that's going to tell let's say all these buildings are using this much power at what time, how concerned are you about privacy in terms of two aspects? Number one, let's say competitors in terms of businesses analyzing what your competitors are doing, if you're going to be operating on a 24-hour cycle, number one, and number two, counterterrorism, countries finding out this city's keeping this much data and or this energy.
So for those that couldn't hear the question, I'll just say that it was about governments disclosing energy data. There was a privacy element. There's a granularity element of your question. I think there's an ownership. Certain businesses already committed, and then from an international perspective, there was I think the word you used was security or counterterrorism. So those were the elements of the question. I'll try to get as much of that in the pieces here. First of all, privacy is paramount. The protection of not just private information, but confidential and security information is an essential responsibility of a government. Edward Snowden and recent crises relevant, but I am not qualified to speak on that behalf, on that topic. What I can talk about is the data that governments are trying to get out. And then so I'm going to take that global universe and just narrow it for a second. First of all, I wish, in general, even with protection of private information, that more governments, more companies, more people were sharing more information if they choose to, if they want to. Right now, very, very few cities, very few governments are sharing energy data at that granularity. So before we can get to the is it a good idea or a bad idea, there's not even that much even happening. There's I would call signal flares. Certain cities are sharing that type of information. In most cases, that type of information is aggregated in some level to the point where it's providing, I would say, a policy or an academic level value. It's not at the home level. I mean, oftentimes you even see block level or zip code level. That's usually the way that information is currently being shared by what I would consider to be the leading cities, leading governments. From a counterterrorism perspective, I think that the building level energy disclosure is less, I've never seen that, to be perfectly honest. Where I have seen that in my experience is with transmission data. So the grid, electricity and the natural gas grid, or the gas grid. That was where I personally, working for the Department of Energy, had accusations thrown my way about data being shared. And it was what I would call the security flag. So you can't share it. It's going to lead to terrible things. Well, has it ever happened? I'll share a personal anecdote. I had a conversation with a very senior government official that said, we don't share this information for airplanes because the terrorists will come back and find where every airplane is. I then opened my tablet and showed them flighttracker.com and said, well, not actually, it's already happening. And this, so now, that may very well be a real concern. I don't mean to mock it, but at least in the example, it was an unusual example because it's happening right now, and I also know a bit about that system. It wasn't just sharing individual location of airplanes. As a result of that one system, and there's many others like it that have come up, the ability for the public to target the congestion risks of certain airports was actually more elevated. So in a funny way, sharing more information in that context led to an increase of security and resiliency because the congestion risks were better understood by organizations other than the federal government that was looking at that one example. So it's a complicated problem. I would say we can spend a whole session just on the privacy aspects of energy data. I do believe that generally speaking, there is some good leadership being shown by those governments that are publishing energy data. I think it's really just a toe in the water, frankly. I think there's so much aggregation being done right now. I'll look to Professor John Kumi in the front, who's done a lot of work with this type of data. And I would say we're starting to show the value from it. But I think as more folks understand more about how this data can be used, the more comfortable people become, the more that folks like you can demonstrate the value of opening up a little bit of data, that'll teach people that it's okay to share more. And I think that is true across the entire energy sector from all the different aspects of personal consumption.
Wasn't there another question somewhere over here? Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious to know if you've started to think about the fact that to make anything successful with the Twofer, you have to do something beyond what else is going on there. And there's an example of, I guess, the folks in London, the Underground, are getting in concert with Telefonica and figuring out how to show congestion patterns for people. But it seems to me that that's probably the thing that's most important, given the fact that what we really need to do is to accelerate getting this adopted. And in order to do that, we have to show enough benefits. And if the ROI, if there's a revenue stream behind it, the ROI will be shorter and more people will be able to take it on. We need to put a smart grid and microgrids across the entire country. But we won't do that unless there's enough benefit shown elsewhere in order to drive that. Because otherwise people will say, why not?
That's a good point.
Who else? Yeah.
So I know the government has started the Green Start or Green Button initiative for buildings. And I was wondering, since they opened that up, has that space been leveraging that data to its maximum value? And if not, what's kind of the barriers blocking it? For both of you guys.
He's the expert on the green button. So
First question I have is, how many of you know what the green button is? Okay, cool. Well, this is an opportunity to share a bit about that. So the question was about the green button. It's an energy standard. It's a protocol. It's an exchange that allows you to share your utility bill, which Adam said before is not necessarily very interesting for a lot of people. It allows you to digitally get it from your utility if they're participating. There's a security protocol, so there's an exchange aspect of that data standard. And there's an element of the standard that allows you to give your data to an authorized third party. So it's not just, in my case, get my own green button from my utility, which is PG&E. I can give it to a bunch of other companies through an OAuth 2.0 protocol. Allows them to basically automatically download that data directly from PG&E without me having to authorize it every time, which from a behavioral economics perspective is huge. So that's what it is. How many folks are using it? Not enough. I would say that it's just getting started. It was just launched a year ago. And for those of you in the energy standards space, a year or two is not that long in any of these sectors and any of the projects that have come through. I would say that there are some inspiring signal flares again. There's examples of this stuff working. So the gentleman who spoke before about the return on investment. I think that this is a fun time, a really, really fun time to be in the energy innovation space because there are so many really inspiring examples. Almost none of the really cool ones have made it to scale. So it's not a question of technology, it's a question of timing. It's almost more of a marketing question if you're in the energy efficiency space than it is a technology question.
And a policy.
We'll come back to policy, I hope. So I'll give a quick anecdote. So one of my favorite companies is a company called Plotwatt. developed by a rocket scientist named Luke Fishback, real name, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Durham, North Carolina. And what he does with Green Button, he can say, all right, I know that I can save people a lot of money if I can get their energy data, but I can't get them all the time to just download something and upload it to me. So they use the Green Button Auto Connect, Green Button Connect, that OAuth protocol, like you log in with Facebook, log in with Twitter, that sort of thing. With that information, particularly from a fleet of restaurants in this one business's case, they're able to really find out at the appliance level, the appliance disaggregation, which appliances within these restaurants are wasting the most money. Here's the funny part. They don't just save energy, which is enough to, in theory, get if you own 100 Outback Steakhouses, can you try to save $1 million a year? That's not where he's getting the real energy savings. It's the stuff beyond energy. For example, in one customer, it's not Outback, another major retail restaurant chain, the majority of the restaurants were closing in 2 to 3 hours early. The young staff just said, this sucks, I'm going home, right? So, but lo and behold, as the owner, that's a tremendous amount of money, especially late at night, that's when the drinks come in, and that's the highest profit item is the drinks, not the food. And so lo and behold, they went in with an energy play, really they're almost helping businesses manage themselves better, all powered by the Green Button. Now, if you, by the way, go... That's a twofer, there we go. So I should have mentioned where to get this stuff. So data.gov, right now the website's okay. That's the one that's going to be renewed in a little bit. And I'll talk a lot about what I call the my data. It's not really open data to the question of privacy. If I choose to share my own energy bill, then it becomes open data when I share it. Data.gov is a great resource. It's going to be relaunched on December 1st. Also, right now, if any of you have fun ideas for this type of product level innovation, energychallenge.energy.gov, a bit redundant, but it's an open challenge right now, a competition where even at just the idea level, you don't have to be an engineer or a coder, or for those of you who are entrepreneurs, this is basically an open call to get some national level recognition for amazing innovation on top of energy data. So again, energychallenge.energy.gov. It's open now, and it should be an opportunity for folks to pursue next steps.
More questions? Yep.
Specifically for Green Button data, what is required for you to sign up to be part of that loop to get their information, like a Powerhouse, for example?
Yeah. So for those of you who have the question is, what's required to sign up to get your energy or to get your Green Button? Of the roughly 350 utilities in the United States, arguably more like 2,000, but there's like 300 big ones. I lost. It's honestly, I should have this number off the top of my head, but I'm no longer with the federal government, so the number escapes me. I'll just say loosely 30, 50-ish utilities. So not the majority of utilities are even participating. Of that number, a handful, 5, are deploying Green Button Connect. That's an automatic connect piece. So you're only talking about a few utilities. Thankfully for Stanford, PG&E and Sempra, San Diego Gas and Electric, are 2 of the leaders in that space. So if I want to do some local innovation, there's some local opportunities. What's required to sign in? Here's the funny part. We talked about entering into the utility business, although I'm proud to have helped grow a business that sold to utilities. I wouldn't recommend it to any of you. Don't do it. It's a terrible idea because it's very, very complicated and bureaucratic, and the rules makes it very hard to scale. And so this is to your point about Green Button.
What? Oh, sorry.
So please.
I was going to ask you a question, but go ahead and finish first.
Okay, the way Green Button is deployed in California is not the same as it's deployed in Texas. That's a problem. There's a policy problem aspect of that. That's a reality of public utility commissions having their own fiefdoms, which is constitutional authority, but it also means that scaling Green Button across different sites is complicated. The only good news there is the data itself is common. Access to the utilities is a tremendous complication.
So my question for, I don't know if maybe both of you guys know, is what do you think the likelihood is of public utilities commissions making funding available rather than only to utilities, instead to any third parties that are able to achieve energy savings for programs? I've talked a little bit to the CPUC about this, but I'm curious. I'm guessing that both you guys know more than I do.
When I was at MIT, we worked on that in Massachusetts. So the idea is that in energy efficiency, that utilities may not be the experts on the most cost-effective, measurable ways of reducing energy use in homes and businesses. So we were working on what we called a community partnership, whereby nonprofits or third-party businesses, much like other groups can bid into the auctions for electric generation, they could bid in and make claims about trying to aggregate their community to reduce energy and sell that back to the utility. So we actually made a lot of progress, and it wasn't the PUC that was a barrier. In this case, it was National Grid, and it's finding the utility that was more open-minded. And the key challenge with energy, and it comes back to data, is the measurement and verification. That we are in the challenging world where if you come one month and say, look, my energy bills dropped 10%, it's hard to say why that happened, whether it's because the weather changed or your baby sister moved out of town or because you installed your fancy new light bulb. And so this idea of anyone who has innovations around measurement and verification of energy savings is going to be, it's a great opportunity because it's really needed in the sector.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, more questions? So Ian, do you want to say just a few words before we break up on the additional opportunities? So if folks do participate in the data jam and develop something interesting, where they might be able to take things?
Sure. So by show of hands, how many entrepreneurs are in the room? How many people have started a business where there wasn't one? Okay, well, a few folks, okay. How many of you want to be entrepreneurs? A few more hands, okay. Well, this little brainstorming session this afternoon, or later this evening, is going to have some amazingly talented folks who have done that quite a bit. Not me, but smarter, more successful folks. This particular brainstorm, though, we're trying to be a bit more constructive with it. We have, I'm not going to call it a formula, but it's a little bit of an outline. And the output of this data jam tonight is just an hour-and-a-half brainstorm. Pizza and good ideas and energy geeks. So what can possibly go wrong? But the goal is not just to come up with a great idea. The goal is to put it in context so that the mentors will be there to facilitate some of the discussions, can help you get rich and famous with your idea. And so there's a number of avenues to consider. Venture capital is obviously one. But there are other avenues that I'd like folks to just have in your vocabulary. There are different types of early stage, well, just in the VC community. So Green Start, Y Combinator, these are some names. If you haven't heard of Green Start or Y Combinator, Google it. It's worth it. You've got some very interesting opportunities to pursue early stage ideas. There's a number of what I would call pitch session and accelerator opportunities. Conferences like Verge. You look at Clean Tech Open. Clean Tech Open is probably one of the bigger ones, especially in this area, that hold basically startup pitch competitions. 5 minutes on stage. You don't even have to have anything built yet. So oftentimes you're able to just, with the passion of your idea and a technological background, able to really get some early stage funding. AngelList, if you haven't heard of that, or any of the Indiegogo. What's the big one? Kickstarter, thank you. How can I forget about Kickstarters? Indiegogo and Kickstarter, those are other crowdsourcing levels of funding for the great ideas. And so these are just kind of categories of stuff. How do you get money? How do you get some early stage resources to take an idea, like may come up tonight, and get some support, external support, to take your idea to the next level? Obviously, there's a tremendous, I can only imagine, the entrepreneurship and mentorship opportunities within Stanford to take you down that path. But money helps. And for some of the folks, some of us who have gone through that process before, we're happy to share our experiences.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So, so we'll break up now. The data jam will start at about 5:30 right outside of this room. It would be great if you could register. There's a registration desk out there, just so that we have your name and can give you some materials for it, and you get a special name tag. So we'll see you out there at 5:30.
Thank you so much.